So I'm just filling in for Bob, for those just joining. Bob Orr is the coach for this committee, not me, but I'm filling in until he can get on. And really the leads should go ahead and take over and probably start with introductions. So I'll just introduce myself, Jennifer Roberts. I'm one of the co-leads for the Carter Center work in North Carolina and one of the members of the steering committee for the Election Commission. And we're really pleased to have everybody working so diligently on these important issues. And next, turn it over to Mary Jo.
Well, hey, everybody. Thank you so much for attending and for joining in this committee. It's hopefully going to be a lot of fun. Bill, hope you're able to hear us now.
I'm good. I'm good.
Excellent. Okay, great. So let's go around and do some introductions. I'll come back and introduce myself a little bit more once we've gone through. Susan, you're next to me, so can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Okay, sure. I'm Susan Klutz from Salisbury. Happy to be on here.
And so do you have a background in elections campaigns?
Well, I do. I do. I served 7 terms here in Salisbury as mayor. So, and it was kind of interesting. I started off with the treasurer and ended up, after so many elections, being my own treasurer. So I'm very familiar with the forms and filling them out, and it makes me very concerned and actually sort of shocked when people don't do them right. So I'm interested in, I'm a rule follower, and I'm interested in finding out what we can do to make sure that people do it the right way.
Okay, cool. David, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. David Nelson, also here in Salisbury. I'm down the street probably from where Susan is at this point. Yeah. And no, I've never done an election, not any of that. Keenly interested though in campaign finance and how it affects the integrity of elections.
Okay, great. Bob Edmonds.
Oh, excuse me. Seem to be wrestling with a frog in my throat, but hi everybody. I'm Bob Edmonds with the firm Fox Rothschild in Greensboro. My experience with these things, I've been in 5 statewide elections. 4 of them were privately financed. 1 was publicly financed.
Okay, cool. All right, Bill.
I'm Bill Wolcott. I'm from Asheville. I may go in and out with the signal because my wife and I are chasing down 2 very young grandchildren at their home in Hawaii. So we're trying to keep up with them, which is not like being in paradise sometimes. So my experience has been that I've been active in Democratic politics for a number of years in the Asheville area, but I was also treasurer of a campaign several years ago for a congressional candidate. So I was familiar with the financing of campaigns, and that's become a real interest of mine in light of certain Supreme Court decisions. So that's why I signed up for the subcommittee.
Great. All right, Blake.
Yeah, Blake Brewer, Rocky Mount, North Carolina. Currently a senior consultant at APCO Worldwide in Raleigh. But my background prior to my government relations work now was with Supreme Court Chief Justice Paul Newby. And then before that, Lieutenant Governor Dan Forrest, where I did double duty in the government office, but also on the campaign. So glad to be here. Always been interested in campaign finance.
Cool. And Rachel?
Hi there, my name is Rachel Capon. I am born and raised in Greensboro, North Carolina. I graduated from UNCG with a degree in political science, and then went to work in the North Carolina legislature. I was a legislative assistant for a representative on the lower east coast of North Carolina. So I had all the cool beaches, Carolina Beach, Holden Beach, Southport. Really loved working for him. And then pivoted to working with my husband. We started our our own political and public affairs consulting firm. And we are contracted in with the Carter Center to help them out with their Trusted Elections Tour and now the Election Commission. So really excited to be a part of this. And actual fun fact, Blake Brewer, Paul Newby did my husband and I's premarital counseling. So we love Paul Newby. He's a wonderful individual.
Oh, that's cool to know that newbie does premarital counseling too, huh? Well, I'm Mary Jo McGowan. So have been interested in campaign finance for several years. I'm a professor at UNC Charlotte, and I wrote a whole book on campaign finance rules. So actually, Susan, what you're talking about filling out the forms and the rules, that was the whole topic of my book. It's called Campaign Finance Complexity. And I got interested in this because I started looking at campaign finance literature and research. And there's a joke about the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, or BICRA, that really what it stands for is before campaigning, retain an attorney. Because it's so complicated to run, you have to have an attorney and you have to have a treasurer and you have to have all these people. And I was like, well, that's really like, it's a deterrent effect to running for office. If you're their local barber and you want to run for office, well, you got to hire all these people now. And that adds to the cost and complexity of campaigns. So that's what I did my research on. That's what the book is about. People think it's all about campaign finance. It's actually about complexity of legislation and regulations. But it was a lot of fun. And so I still do some research in campaign finance. I also, this spring, I'm going to teach my senior seminar class on campaign finance. I'm going to pair it up with this commission and hopefully help have my students do a lot of research on campaign finance and help us write things. That is my goal, so that they'll get a lot more involved. And students are really interested in campaign finance. They don't know what it is. They think they know what it is, but they don't. And it's really interesting to see how they learn about it and kind of get into depth into how it works and how complicated it really is. So I'm super excited to run this committee and see where we can go with some research and some interest in campaign finance. I'm so glad all of you are on it. I'll tell you now, if anybody wants to come speak to my class in the spring semester, let me know. Okay, I will gladly have you come speak to the class about running a campaign, how campaign finance works, being a treasurer on a campaign. God bless you. Anybody that's a treasurer, it's kind of a nightmare. So I'm willing to have anybody come talk to the students. It'll be a great opportunity. So thanks for everybody for participating. So our first thing that we need to think about is meeting schedule. And the report is due by June 30th. And so we probably need to meet a few times in the spring semester. I kind of wanted to get an idea of how many times you all thought it was important to meet. And you can just throw out answers if you want.
Monthly?
Monthly? Bob, I'm sorry, Bob, did you say monthly?
Yeah, it was me, yeah.
Okay. Monthly, anybody else? More often, less often? Good with once a month? Okay. Sounds great to me, because that'll be a good 5 to 6 meetings before we need to finish the report up. And then are there any days that are not good for anybody that you absolutely cannot meet on that date?
I'll just say Mondays are the hardest days for me to get a meeting in.
Okay.
I can't do second Tuesdays. It's the only time I can't do.
Okay.
I'm with David about Mondays being bad.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Bill? You're muted, Bill. Can you unmute, Bill?
Yeah,
While
the
he's-
time of day. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
It's the time of day. I'm retired, so it's really the time of day that's an issue, not the day itself.
Okay. Susan, what were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say, I said second Tuesdays, that's morning only. I'm okay in the afternoon, so I'm pretty free. Well, I'm flexible.
I have class Tuesdays and Thursdays, but I can fit something in. I'm always fitting things in, so it's fine.
What do you
Okay.
prefer?
I would prefer like a Wednesday, quite honestly, just to have my head clear from class.
That's okay with me.
Yeah,
If we did that, I'd need to do afternoon on a
that would be
Wednesday.
fine. Yeah,
And I'm good Wednesdays.
okay. Wednesday PM. Okay, that sounds great. Okay, so the big or the next big thing is we need to think about what we want to research. Campaign finance is a huge topic, right? There's lots of different parts of it. I always think about it as the tools of campaign finance. It's like you got contributions, you've got spending, you've got public financing, you've got regulations, you have different parts of it. So what do you think are like the big topics or big questions you would like to see answered? What are your concerns?
Just for clarification, because it is a big, we're focusing exclusively on North Carolina and North Carolina legislation, right? We're not saying, gonna put something out to Tillis's office about some federal change that we might want to see, correct?
That's my understanding, is that it would just be North Carolina legislation. Or North Carolina rules.
Yeah, I mean, particular interest to me is just overall compliance, contribution limits, which are now, I guess, statutorily adjusted at 2 years. Perhaps looking at North Carolina registered super PACs, or North Carolina registered PACs, I believe is the term in statute.
So what about the PACs?
Yeah, I mean, well, we have the candidate contribution limits, but then, the PACs can take, unlimited sums. There's some debate as to whether or not, general campaign finance laws in general are quote unquote incumbent protection plans. Some say, let's have instant reporting and no contribution limit, somewhat public financing on the complete other end of the spectrum. So, be interested to explore sort of that philosophical issue and how that might relate to legislation.
Okay, great. Okay, Bob just came on. You want to just introduce yourself real quick?
Bob Orr, one of the co-chair with Jennifer Roberts and working with our professors and on our election commission. Sorry to be late. I don't know, Rachel, did you explain what
I did not. I figured I would leave that up to you to share.
Yeah. Well, my Justice Edmonds knows, because I talked to him the other day. My wife took a fall over Thanksgiving and fractured her wrist, so they scheduled her surgery this morning at 10 o'clock. So I've been negotiating the joys of all that, and so anyway, it's good to see everybody. Particularly, I see my friend Billy Wolcott out there in Hawaii, living the good life. Anyway,
I hope your wife's surgery went well.
it did. Yeah, she's. I think just one of those deals. But thank you for your patience. It's good to see everybody. And Mary Jo, continue on.
Okay. So we're just talking out about what topics we want to research about campaign finance, and or any big questions, concerns, kind of what directions, and not one direction, but a couple of different directions we want to go. And I'll be quite honest, I'm being completely self-serving about this, that I'm going to take your topics and I'm going to assign them to my students. So you're helping me build my syllabus right now.
Yeah. One thing. Let me chime in. I mean, this is a huge subject area. I mean, I don't think we have the time or resources to really hit everything. So I think trying to get a sense of one, what's important from the commission perspective, but hopefully from some experts in the field where they see problems that we could look at and examine for better practices. And did you mention the campaign finance side on the State Board of Elections? Yeah.
I hadn't gotten that far. I did actually just put I had Rachel put the campaign finance manual in the Google folder for you all too, so that you'll have access to that. But yeah, the state site is fantastic for all the information and rules and regulations on campaign finance in North Carolina. Bob, do you know, who would you think of, or any of y'all, who do you think of when you think of a campaign finance expert in North Carolina?
Well, we're lucky in this respect. Lindsay Wakely is the attorney with the State Board of Elections. And I actually hired Lindsay for her first job out of undergraduate school years ago. I mean, she's really, she'll be great to work with and a huge resource. I think beyond that, and Bob Edmonds, maybe some of the others, know lawyers who've had any experience in grappling with campaign finance, that we need maybe come up with some names there.
Okay. So anybody else? Big questions, concerns?
I'll just point out that in my elections that I had, one was publicly financed, and it was considerably different from the others in the way it ran and, you know, the effect that had on how you behaved as a candidate and so forth. I'm not sure where we're going to go with this, because there's just always the, you know, is it politically possible to get public financing? And if it is, you know, is it desirable? Some would say yes, and some would say no. But I do think it's a compelling topic, perhaps for this group.
I have a question. I'd like to ask, this may not be a topic to study. You all may know the answer to this, but I'm just curious, when I read about people that don't follow the timeline, they don't get the reports in on time, how are they punished? I mean, I know there's a fee supposedly that they'll be charged, but does the state board follow through with that? I mean, because some of them, seems like to me they would be huge amounts. Do they pay that? I mean, I'm just curious. I just don't know that.
Well, this is what my son calls cul-de-sac research. I actually sat in a board meeting a few months back in which there must have been a dozen appeals to the board to waive the fine. And just from that one appearance, most of the fines are not large, but the board looks at, you know, were they 2 days late, or are they just ignoring the filing period? Is this the 5th time we've had to deal with them versus a first-time candidate who just, you know, was sort of overwhelmed by the responsibilities? I didn't see a lot of money being charged, but, you know, $500 for a school board candidate is not inconsequential. So.
Right. I was just curious about that.
And I haven't looked in a long time, but the state board keeps those data, right?
Right.
Okay. I'm just thinking research project. It would be really cool to see whether or how much people are, like who's getting fined, who's actually paying the fees.
Right.
You know, is it the first time candidates that are paying the fees, or is it other candidates that are more experienced? Do they get them waived more often? And are the fees really any incentive to actually comply, or is it just something you have to deal with after the fact?
Well, I'm guessing Lindsay will be able to, sort of address the problems they see. Looked to me like there were a lot of violations, but when you consider the number of candidates in any particular election cycle, that's not surprising. And then you lose, and your brother-in-law is your campaign treasurer, and he no longer is interested in what you're doing. I mean, it's really tough. I mean, I know Bob and I, Edmonds and I, have been candidates. Susan, I guess President Nelson, you've only been a candidate for the presidency, right? Yeah. Not for office.
We're done.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good topic. Like, I mean, how does compliance work? Just the details of compliance, because I find that fairly important, even to the everyday citizen, knowing that compliance is enforced or that compliance is an issue, gives them, might help boost some confidence in the campaign system. That if they know these things are actually being enforced and fines collected, and that politicians pay a price, then that can help citizens think, well, this system works for us.
Yeah. Right. I would note on the drop down on the state board website of the multiple topics, they have reporting schedules, reporting forms, reporting software, and treasurer training. So, I mean, I think it's a pretty sizable emphasis on the part of the state boards. And I have no idea whether local boards, deal with this or not. But I do think this is a significant area for us to look into on how it works, and are there ways to improve the system.
Okay.
So what do y'all think about outside committees? And again, I'm looking at their website. They have a whole topic on independent expenditures, electioneering, communications, and special contributors. I have no idea what a special contributor is. Is that a topic of interest that folks are interested in?
Well, Bob, let me ask, are we, as a committee, are we tasked with identifying problems or coming up with suggestions, or we're dealing with sort of a squishy monster here?
Y'all picked one of the largest topics in the whole election framework. I think to start with, we want to get an overview of how it works, and maybe hear from people like Lindsay where they see problems that the state or local boards grappling with. I don't see us getting into federal campaign expenditures. That seems way beyond our pay grade here. But it's not just the mechanics of having a treasurer and a committee, but who are the people putting money into the elections? I mean, personally, that's an area I'm interested in. Outside money, quote, dark money. How does that work? What's the impact on the system? Are there better ways to do it?
There's lots of research on that. I think that having Lindsay maybe for the first meeting to kind of go over it would be a great idea if we can get her. Just to talk about it, just give us an overview of campaign finance law and the big questions and the big problems that they see at the state board, what are obstacles to candidates? I mean, this is part of the thing that I'm really interested in is making it easier for actual candidates to run, not just about getting the money, but making the systems or the process of filing and compliance as easy as possible so that it kind of levels the playing field for your average candidate versus your incumbent or your big money candidate. That's at least where I'm coming
Yeah.
from. Mhm.
Susan, what are your thoughts? And President Nelson, you got any thoughts on this topic area? And Blake?
Let me think a minute. What about, is there an interest in how campaign funds are used? I just know after following federal, which I thought was fascinating, Santos, with the federal government, and I don't remember, it's been 10 years since I ran, so I don't remember about the restrictions on what you can and cannot spend money on. But that's an interesting one too.
Definitely not shopping.
Right.
Well,
Or
it
Botox.
depends on what you're shopping for.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
Not Botox,
Yeah.
well.
Who was the legislator that bought $10,000 worth of new suits? But that was so he would look good for his constituents. He had to, didn't want to be out there in blue jeans,
Right.
t-shirt. I do think, that ought to be at least part of the discussion. What are the limits? Are the limits clear? Are the limits enforceable?
Yeah. And I don't know, maybe that's not important enough to, we've got so many different subjects here we need to look at, but.
Blake, I'm curious, before Bob got on, you mentioned the sort of PAC question, but you seem to suggest the worry about it favoring incumbents. Is that what Mary Jo was saying about making it accessible to a broader scope of candidates? Is that partly what you were getting at?
I don't want to speak for Mary Jo. I mean, I think there's, a couple different schools of thought with campaign finance. Some people really like it. They like, curbing the amount of influence in elections, money in elections. But I guess on the other side of the token, some people would argue that campaign finance laws, as they exist, I mean, there's ways to get around them. Okay, well, we're not going to give to a candidate committee, we'll give it to a political action committee. Oh, by the way, ex-candidate's best friend for 20 years runs the PAC. So that school of thought would be, well, some might say, well, let's air out all these things. Let's be realistic. And, if we can have instant reporting or whatever, just take the limits off and, we'll know who's given the what, that would be an extreme. But, Mary Jo, I don't know if that's kind of what you're referring to in terms of just the compliance. I mean, campaign finance is a good business. If, a lawyer, it's a good business to be in. So.
Absolutely.
I do think the transparency aspect, like, is really important from a good government standpoint. I mean, our overall thrust of fair, safe, and secure elections, I think, implies that people have a right to know who's putting money up, and I'm sure some of that is federal issues or federal campaign finance that we don't necessarily need to get into. But I'd be curious, because I don't know the answer on what are the limits in North Carolina. I mean, we've seen some in judicial races outside groups that ostensibly aren't coordinating with the candidate. Like you say, I think there's sometimes a wink and a nod in how that actually applies.
This has always fascinated me too. It's like, how do you know if there is or is not coordination? Like, how does the state board monitor that? It's not like they can, monitor a candidate's communications,
Right.
and or a PAC's communications. So you never know if there is some coordination going on. It's kind of like, oh, the PAC said this, and then the candidate said that. Well, maybe they talked together. You don't really know. And I don't know that there's any way to really monitor or enforce that. Or I have
That's where
no idea how the state does that.
that's where you get 20 attorneys together and then they have 30 opinions as to how to deal with that.
Exactly.
Well, and the other thing that bothers me is the so-called issue campaign. Tell Congressman Smith, stop, raping and pillaging the farm community, and it's only run, it's being run in the context of an election, but it's under the guise of an issue that somehow skirts the outskirts of what is legal. I mean, those are some things I'd like to see us study, but again, this is committee driven, so.
Well, and I'll say this and I'll shut up. One of the hot topics have been disclosures on social media graphics or things like that. I think there's been several bills introduced at the General Assembly. They haven't really gone anywhere, if I'm remembering correctly, about that. And so, if we want to look at disclosures as it pertains to, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, whatever the hot thing is now. That's something we can look at. And to that point, I don't know, in terms of outside experts, my former colleague, Stephen Walker, is pretty well adept with campaign finance law and has argued before the state Supreme Court on Force v. Impact, which is a big case a couple years ago. He might be able to offer some insight if we wanted to seek some commentary.
Yeah, Steve would be a good.
So are you talking about like on Facebook or Twitter, it's saying the disclosure that this ad was financed by so and so? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Force v. Impact Force v. Impact was about this disclosure and 2012 campaign about state employees PAC and their lack of a disclaimer on it.
Okay. No, I mean, it's a kind of a whole new world, right? Because it's not just on print or on the TV. And how do you make sure that gets out there and that people know? Because like to Bob's point, if there is an issue advocacy ad and a citizen doesn't know that that's actually a campaign ad, I think it's important to know that it's a campaign ad because you know that you're trying to be persuaded one way or the other. And knowing that you have the knowledge in hand to make a decision whether you're going to accept that information or not accept that information. So I think it's important to have that disclosure there.
Does anybody know of national organizations, nonprofits that are in the campaign finance reform space?
I mean, other than like Open Secrets that pushes a lot of the information for federal campaigns and has like the whole has a whole section on the legislation and cases and stuff like that. I don't know that they're really pushing so much. They're just more about getting the information out there, which is super helpful.
Well, in our spare time, let's poke around and see if we can, if there's some folks out. I'm trying to remember. I don't think it's open secrets, but maybe it is. There's a young woman, Anna, what's her last name? She went to NC State undergrad, and then she went to law school in DC. And this is sort of her Macedonia, something like that. I can't.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. And she's got a North Carolina connection, so we might, that might be individual or group to reach out to.
Still not sure where we're headed. We're not, I don't think we're talking about best practices, but we do seem to be sort of drilling down towards what do we think are the bigger problems? Is that where we're headed?
That's what I understand our charge is, to look at what issues are important to people in North Carolina, and maybe shed more light on those issues. And if there are problems, look and see and research what are best practices nationwide. What is North Carolina doing that are not doing that other states are, that might help us in North Carolina?
Yeah, and Bob, you mentioned the public financing, which was limited to, I think, judicial races for like 3 or 4 cycles. But there were, as I recall, there were all sorts of loopholes though, where outside money could come in, and then there was some fund that was supposed to, you could apply to help you respond. I don't know whether we want to get into, that kind of discrete question, but I think at the end of the day, if we want to say, what do we want campaign finance in North Carolina to look like? What's a good government system? How close are we to it? What should we do to make it more ideal to what we're seeking?
I think Mary Jo's response was really helpful. So thank you.
I think Bob, Mary Jo.
Go ahead.
This is Bill. May I say something?
Sure.
Yeah.
I thought Bob's point was well taken on what the goal should be, which is what should campaign finance look like in North Carolina. And I wonder if we can't arrive at what several topics we need to focus on today, should we make that a homework topic and make a goal to decide those topics that are important at our first meeting in January? And maybe our homework would be, because I am not currently up to speed on a lot of these issues, give us a chance to do some readings and further personal research, just to be ready to answer the question of what exactly are the topics we need to focus on to include in a report. It's just a thought.
So for the first meeting, have Lindsay present, and then the committee discusses, focusing down on the specific.
Yeah. Try to get it down to something specific, and Lindsay could be very helpful in evaluating our responses when we come back to the meeting as what we think it should be. Yeah. So
right,
she might be very helpful in that regard.
Okay.
And I feel like my feeling about this was, the purpose of it was to provide trust to the public that we had, looked at this very comprehensively and seriously, and reported if we see where we do see problems. So I would think it would be toward transparency, or are there problems in North Carolina elections? Are they honest? Can you trust them? So the public will know that we've looked into it, and this is what we found. So I agree to have Lindsay come. I think should be really helpful to us.
Okay, well, thinking about Lindsay coming means that we need to have a date. So Bob, before you got on, we were talking about Wednesday afternoons. Would that date work for you?
other than the 15th and 22nd, I've got a trip in January that actually starts on a Wednesday and I come back on a Wednesday. And I want to say, yeah, I don't have a calendar in front of. I think it's January 15th through the 22nd.
That's a Monday to Monday.
No, that's a Monday. All right. Well, then it's the 17th through the
24th.
Yeah, let me see if I can find it.
Well, how about Monday, January 10th? Oh, we got Brad Young.
My apologies.
Okay. Give us a second, Brad, and then we're going to circle back to you. Would Wednesday, January 10th?
That's my
workable?
only Wednesday that won't work in the month of January.
Uh,
About
Darn it.
Tuesday.
Okay, well, what about, I mean, is the 3rd too early?
Not if Lindsay's available.
Yeah, I mean, we have to see if Lindsay can do it that day. That's a big thing.
We could always, if the 24th works for everyone, we could always provide her with 2 dates, maybe the 3rd and the 24th.
Yeah.
Okay.
'17th and 24th were the 2 days that I'll be traveling, but
So then do we want to push for then the 31st of January? Or is that too late?
I'd like to see. I mean, are we just locked in on Wednesday, or for teaching reasons, or
A little bit. I have class all day, Tuesday and Thursdays. But like if we could do it on a Tuesday or Thursday and I could maybe have my class listen in, that would be really cool.
Yeah, well, the first one would be perfect with if Lindsay's there to talk about the system. Well,
You're talking about the 3rd?
well,
Yeah, the classes. So at UNC Charlotte, classes don't start until the 10th.
so if we did a Tuesday or Thursday, the 9th or the 9th, maybe.
Yeah, although my class is at 10 o'clock in the morning. Oh,
and I'm tied up in the mornings, first, the second Tuesdays.
Right.
well, let's not worry about my class. Let's do, Rachel, maybe we can just check Lindsay's schedule and see when she's available and then find some dates that work for us.
Okay, so do you want me just to propose January 3rd since that seems to work for everyone on the committee? And then if that does not work for her, then we can see what dates are available and then we'll circle back with everyone.
I think that would be great.
Okay, perfect. And then time wise for January 3rd, I know we're looking at the afternoon. What's good for everyone?
It'd have to be after 2 for me.
Not a
2
problem
or,
for me.
2 or after.
Yeah.
That works for me.
Okay. Okay, so Rachel's gonna talk to Lindsay and we're gonna see about the 3rd and then we'll circle back with other dates if necessary.
Yeah.
Okay. All right,
Did we set
Brad.
a time? Did we
like
set a time?
After
would
2 o'clock,
would 2 to
After 2.
3 be good with everyone?
it'll be fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Brad, you're up. You
I am.
You want to introduce
Okay. Well,
introduce yourself and any big issues that you would like to see the committee talk about.
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Brad Young. I'm the executive director of North Carolina Institute of Political Leadership. So we, through our fellows program and some of our women's workshops, work with candidates or people that are working on campaign staff and as well as state agencies. So come in pretty frequent contact with people that are practitioners of the things that we're talking about, and over the course of all these different subcommittees. So certainly something that I'm looking forward to being involved with this year. I can't say that I have any issue in particular that that was jumping out at me, or that I was hoping that would this particular group would take up. And just apologies for being late. My just about as soon as I was about 10 minutes before we were supposed to start, got a call from our school that my daughter had face planted at recess and busted up her knee and chin and all that good stuff. So I had to run and grab her real quick. So yeah, she seems to be doing fine now.
Good, good, good.
So Brad, running the IAPL, do you find that there are like problems with campaign finance that candidates run into oftentimes?
Awareness, in the separation of those particular duties, and depending on how far along they are in the process, you might have an attitude of almost quid pro quo as being an accepted and normal thing within politics. I hate to say that, it doesn't happen all the time, but it has been something that has come up more often than not, with people that might be in their first early stages of trying to plan a campaign for the future. But yeah, it's certainly something that we try to make central to all of our planning. I think the state board has done a good job making the resources available, and just trying to understand, some of the flagrant issues that might be going on and within campaigns, and finance are an important piece of what we try to impart to our fellows.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. And Brad, I think you're going to be a very helpful resource, being kind of on the ground with candidates and meeting people. That's really helpful, I think. So the other part of today that we wanted to talk about was resources and kind of research for future reference. And Jennifer put a couple of them in the chat. A big one is called ncsl.org. It's the National Conference of State Legislatures. And so it's an organization that does research on like every state issue across the country. So they compile legislation and referendums and all kinds of information and data across the states. And there's a whole section on elections and voting, and there's a subsection on campaign finance. And so they have kind of a cross-sectional look at campaign finance laws across the state, and some of the cases that affect states. So it's a great place to start to get kind of a primer on campaign finance legislation across the states. I also love the State Board of Elections, does a really, really good job of putting the information out there, but it's kind of more candidate oriented, as it should be. So you can also, there's links to the Federal Election Commission, which goes through stuff like what's soft money, what's hard money, what's dark money. And there's a lot of information out there just to kind of define terms so that we're all familiar with what we're talking about. I did put in the shared Google folder the campaign finance manual for North Carolina, and there's a whole section in there as well that has all the definitions for North Carolina, what these terms mean, which is really important for candidates. They need to know, what it is that they're doing. What's a treasurer? What's that role? There's also Open Secrets, as I mentioned, is more of a federal level organization that collects the data on campaign finance, all the collection, all the money. There's another one, it's called followthemoney.org. It's really wonky and not nearly as good as it used to be. And it's on state and local elections. And the Council of State Governments, Blake, is that it? Yeah, that's also a really good one. So there's a ton of information out there. There's not one central place to go to look for campaign finance that's going to give you the overview of it. It's kind of piecemeal looking at different parts of it. But those are some good ones to really start with. Anybody else have other suggestions out there? None. Okay. We covered them all. Okay.
Well, quick question. Do the political parties have kind of a campaign finance entity at all?
Not that I've noticed. They kind of point their candidates out to these different groups and saying, your best place to look is, your county website or the state website. Because it's just, if a party gives the wrong advice, then everybody's in trouble. So it's best just to look at the state or the county level. Okay. Well, if you think of anything or come across anything in your research, we have this great shared Google folder, and Rachel can put things up there. If you would just maybe let us all know that you've posted something in there, so that we all can be aware of what's out there. And I'll try and I guess either in the meeting notes or just maybe a list of different websites that you can go to look up campaign finance information. Okay. So our kind of next steps things, we're going to find out a date from Rachel about when Lindsay can meet. We're going to meet in January. We're going to meet once a month, and we're going to write a report that's due June something, June 10th. I can't remember the date in June. Yeah.
We're flexible at this point.
Oh, okay.
Relatively so.
Relatively flexible. Okay,
Yeah.
It's due in June. So we should be able to get things written up by June. And we've got several topics. I'm going to look at the notes that Rachel has so graciously taken and kind of boil this down into a couple of big topics that we can really dig deeper into. So, any questions or comments? Anything I've missed?
I would just add, Mary Jo, thank you for your leadership and organization for this. And Rachel is our staffer, although she's staffing all of the committees at this point. So go easy on her, but she is a tremendous resource. And don't hesitate to call Jennifer or me or any of the other folks involved if you have questions or concerns or anything. And again, we thank Catawba College for their participation in leadership. It's been a huge.
It's been great. We really appreciate it.